And now, a story from the Appleseed.
So this next story is a personal story. On January the 6th, 2012, I arrived in the United States to do a master's in storytelling at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City, Tennessee. Why? Because the year before, I entered the crisis of the 30s. Yeah. My original plan was to go to Nepal, catch up with wisdom, flirt with my purpose, and eventually find a place I could call home. A friend of mine said, Carolina, estás loca. Now, there was nothing wrong with Cali, Colombia, the place where I am from. Cali is a beautiful, hot, diverse city, the capital of salsa and plastic surgery. Ruled by the Cali cartel during the 80s and 90s, also known as the Gentleman Cartel, if you watch Narcos, the series. So I grew up with the burden of being from a very dangerous place. Single out at airports, and sometimes, the usual question, are you carrying any drugs? Now, that first week when I was in college at ETSU, they gathered all the international students to welcome us and to let us know that we could be experiencing something called cultural shock. And I thought, that's never going to happen to me. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm the sign of adventure and freedom. Nope, I didn't fit in. The first 3 months, I was so sad that I just wanted to go back home. I almost purchased the ticket to go back home twice. But the first time, I met an Indian woman at the bus stop on campus, and she asked me, where are you from? Colombia. So you dance salsa? Yes. Oh, would you like to join me doing an Indian dance for the Multicultural Day? So random invitations like this, it's what kept me in school for the first year. And if you're wondering how the dance went, well, it was so much of a hit that people thought I was Indian for a whole year. Yeah. So among the things I struggled the most was the cold weather, because it represented the opposite of everything that was familiar and dear to me. I also struggled with the Tennessean accent because it's not the way Friends, the TV show, talks. And when you're an immigrant, you do watch those comedies to practice your English. But the long-lasting struggles that really affected me were pretty much the food and the stories told. Allow me to elaborate. I attended many festivals, storytelling festivals, and I noticed that there is a particular tale that the audience favor, and it is that talks about the good old days, when America was great, when folks were decent, life was simple, and they were all on the same page. These are stories that feel tense, invoked tender family moments, full of olfactory sensations. When freshly baked goods were pulled out of the oven, the audience would go, ah, and they would nod their heads in approval. These stories were like gospel, so I called them Biscuit stories. As a foreign teller trying to share the beauty of my cultures, those Biscuit stories resemble a bubble world, self-centered and somehow holding onto a buttery past. And we eat a lot of grease in Colombia, but still. So I pushed harder. My entire repertoire became about Latin America. I even launched a podcast. Because when you experience pushback, you become an ambassador or a defender of your culture. And then I declared war on biscuits. And I refused to eat them. But I've been living in the South for 12 years, so it's been hard. Thankfully, my husband's generous belly took on the burden, of eating them just to avoid the question, oh, honey, you didn't like your biscuits. But please don't be upset. I know some people get patriotic with their food, but there's more to the story. The stereotypical Latina cooks It's in her DNA. It's a skill passed from abuela to mamá to hija, the subtle art of being una buena ama de casa, a good housewife. Not me. My mother never taught me how to cook. Instead, she chased me out of the kitchen every time I pop in. Why? It remains a mystery. Was there some sort of sleeping beauty curse if I dared to touch a kitchen utensil before the age of 21? I don't know. And to aggravate my cooking orphan situation, both mis abuelas, my grandmothers, lived far away. One had dementia while the other had been shunned from the family. So I did not grow up learning any traditional Colombian dishes from any mother figure. And guess what? I was not too sad about it because I'm terrible at following instructions. Like that one time when I added a whole cup of salt to a pasta pesto recipe. And to even it out, I added half a cup of sugar. It didn't work, but we ate it, and we spent the whole night dehydrated. Yep. But in every story, there's always an until. In 2022, my husband took a sabbatical year and we sold our home and we moved back to Johnson City, Tennessee to live with his brother and his grandmother. Doris is the most stylish 94-year-old lady. She wears makeup that makes her look in her 50s. That's a big accomplishment. Her house resembles an European castle. She's tall, fair, slim, despite her unyielding desire to eat biscuits from Bojangles once a week. Unfortunately, her health had been declining over the years, yet the several falls and trips to the ER did not affect her humor and grace. But it was just a matter of time for her family to announce that they were moving her to a retirement home. And the news came when my husband and I were relocating to North Carolina. Doris kept her cool, and she became more unyielding in her desire to cook. I understood that cooking meant much more to her than it meant to us. It reminded her of her good old days, of the numerous Thanksgivings, of her motherhood, of the strength she had to gather when her husband passed away, of when she had to become a businesswoman at the age of 50, and she did it for 30 years. Somehow all those memories were in those pots, in those meals. So one day, with no warning, she began pulling out pots and pans out. My husband and his brother were away, so when I came into the kitchen, I reluctantly asked, "Do you need help?" Like the boss she began instructing me on what to do, and it was easy to follow because in between, she told me stories. And like many other times, she told me she loved me like I was one of her own. That night, the four of us came together for one last meal with her. And after chatting for a while, Doris noticed that I hadn't touched my biscuit. She asked, "Carolina, you didn't like your biscuit?" I said, "I'm full, Doris, but thank you, though." She insisted. Knowing that this was important to her, I took a bite, while my husband looked at me horrified, thinking I would choke. But I didn't. That biscuit was emotionally tasty, because for the first time, I had a fond memory of cooking with a grandma. And although this country welcomed me all right, I never felt rooted. I was always the immigrant until that meal with my new family. And in the words of a friend, "Carolina, Johnson City was your Nepal." So I guess I finally have a biscuit story to tell. And the war, it's over. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for a story from the Appleseed.